Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 30 of CBD Talk Podcast. And today we have with us Lance, Parvin. Lance Parvin, who's joining us from Nevada, right?
I'm in Nevada, Las Vegas.
Nevada, Las Vegas. Gotta love that. Hey, so today's episode is really very interesting to me because I know that there are a lot of athletes out there, either recreational athletes, professional athletes, even kids, that end up pulling muscles, hurting themselves, getting on opiates and things like that because that's what the doctor prescribes because they don't they're just not as aware of the alternatives that are out there, or they're afraid to recommend alternatives out there. And so since there are so many athletes out there, and since there's a big push right now with the NFL players and concussion protocols and things like that to bring more awareness to CBD and cannabis as a whole, I just am really thrilled to be able to speak with Lance today so that he can explain to us part of why CBD and cannabis works well for athletes. And so we're going to start out with having Lance give us a little bit of his background.
That sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. My background is simple. I spent a lot of my life studying biomechanics. In college, I took a course on herbal psychopharmacology and herbal pharmacology, which was from a doctor who kind of pioneered that field, which was interesting. It got me more influenced into the herbal kind of remedies that are out there for a lot of people. As time went on, my late wife was diagnosed years ago, I think initially in 2012, with cancer. And stage 1, had a lumpectomy, didn't do chemo. And then years later, it had come back. I find it interesting because we work with a lot of people that are sick and a myriad of disease. And so by God's grace is how I really got into cannabis. It was not because of my own intellect or not because of my interest in it, but when it became metastatic a few years later, she ended up having stage 4 breast cancer that metastasized. It went to her brain and her lungs. At this point, the medical industry, their best bets were chemo and radiation. Didn't do chemo because you can't do chemo to the brain, but did basic radiation, which had a zero effect. Actually, had zero effect. This is when I started kind of following protocols of medical things. We're getting actually MRIs, getting all this collecting data. So I had a baseline, midline, and a follow-up. After the midline, where we could actually track what the radiation had done, it had no effect on the tumors. It did give her brain damage. So after that, they gave a terminal prognosis. God kind of showed me some stuff I didn't understand at the time. I understand it now. And I got access to cannabis oil, specifically in a concentrate form, which contains CBD, THC, Delta-9. And within a day, there was proof of neurogenesis in the brain. Within 4 weeks, and we have the MRIs to back this up, 4 of the tumors were gone. She had five tumors in her brain. 4 were gone. The biggest one was actually a fraction of its size. So we saw within a few months her cancer was gone, actually. We were able to show neurogenesis and neural pathway development. So from this point, and this was still a taboo topic, people were still looking at cannabis as a whole, mainly the recreational side. And this is
what year was this now?
This was in 2013 when I really got into it.
Mm-hmm.
When I really got into it, studying it more. And there was the normal stuff, the recreational side. I mean, studies were starting to come out. There's been 20,000 studies up to this point, but people were still kind of confused of what it does and which form should I take it in: edibles, smoking, vaping. And so that's what started me on this journey. And then from there, we've just kind of had a myriad of people that we consult for throughout the country with all kinds of disease. And so that's one of I get a lot of misconceptions both from doctors and people of what they think cannabis does. It's because over time, the media's, put out propaganda, and you have two extreme views. You have the view that, number one, it's completely recreational, has no medicinal value, which obviously is false. And I always invite people, if they believe this and their doctor tells them that, they can always refer to the Virginia study, which was done in 1974 by the Nixon administration, showing cell regeneration and the effectiveness on cancer. So that's a federal study. But they've known forever of what plants do. the fascinating thing, and this is what I always try to tell people about the endocannabinoid system, it responds to plants. God made us put the plants here. That's why man tries to recreate that stuff, doesn't do a very good job. That's why pharmaceuticals are synthetics of plants, and they all have a myriad of side effects based on your genetics. So you can't look at a drug and say, well, this person didn't get this, they got this. Well, that's because we are all different genetically. We do all have this system, though, and so that's what cannabis actually stimulates. So that's where kind of my background got started into this field, and then since then we've seen a lot of miraculous things. And so I always tell people, to me, cannabis is a stepping stone for faith, because a lot of the things that people thought were impossible, they're quickly seeing are possible. We don't even know it's possible. How can we kind of make that claim? And so I try to tell people, do research, but that's hard to do because there's misinformation. So at this point, what's a good source to kind of go to it? It's individuals. I find that as the country's turning it away and people are getting more inclined to using it, they don't know where to go. And I say,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. The initial botanists, the initial growers that were doing this for years, they had the right reason. They literally wanted to help people. I'm not talking about the drug culture that was intentionally propagated. In fact, it's actually funny. I recently talked with Tommy Chan, and he's obviously well known in the community. He had no idea cannabis was medical. So for all that time that he was with Cheech doing the movies, propagating that recreational side, he realized it was medicinal when he got cancer recently. So it's funny what's out there and then what people actually, know. It's two very different things of how it's kind of pushed to the landscape of what's going on.
Yeah, it is very interesting how it started one way, warped, and then it's coming back, and that's why it's so great that we have people who are willing to talk about the medicinal effects, and the fact that you have MRIs and things to back it up, that lends so much credibility to it, and it opens people's minds to the possibility, like you said, of faith.
Yes.
It opens their minds to just at least
Yeah,
research it.
we realize we don't know anything. I mean, that's the key thing
Uh-huh.
is we don't. When people tell me they understand the body, I go, don't get sick. I tell doctors the same, don't get sick if we understand the body so well. And it's interesting having that ability to both see people, clients, and also see doctors that are clients, because most people never get to see a doctor when they get sick. And I can tell you firsthand, when a doctor gets sick, it's amazing the alternatives that they now have access to that they'll use. They won't tell the patient this. But
Yeah.
at the moment, we had a doctor we were working with from MD Anderson, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And she goes, for years I really thought we were helping people. And I go, what changed? She goes, I got cancer. And she goes, I realized it was a scam. And these are words from doctors. So this is the stuff that needs to get out there so people see it's not just someone trying to propagate a myth, that what's being told to people is not the truth. It's kind of skewing a view. And that's why as people are starting to see the health benefits in regards to, athletes, what we've seen is by far it's the best anti-inflammatory, bar none. That's not having invasive negative side effects as some other pharmaceuticals, obviously all pharmaceuticals do, but just on a basic level, most diseases inflammation. So if you can combat inflammation, people start seeing, whether it's something like MS, soreness starts to go away. Synovial fluid, they're moving their joints better. Psoriatic arthritis, autoimmune disorders. We're seeing a response in the person to where it's not a mental thing. It's not a placebo.
Exactly.
There's a few different things that are happening in regards to pain and inflammation. When you start to decalcify the pineal gland, it's able to release melatonin, serotonin, and dopamine. And this is why people right away, they start having better REM sleep. And that's a huge thing of recovery, because people always say, well, should I use, indica, sativa? And I go, well, you should be getting rest. You don't want a hyper-stimulated, effect of your brain. You want something that's pretty much very mellow.
Yes.
Sleeping. So normally we recommend people are using this prior to bed. Use it before bed. You don't have to use this throughout the day because you still have to function.
Yes.
Which it's always amusing to be like, I need to take it here 8 times a day. They're smoking. And the big difference with how you're taking it is absorption. Keep in mind, cannabis is fat soluble. Yeah. So there becomes a law of diminishing returns. And I see this pushed a lot too, where it goes, well, if you're getting results with this, imagine if you double that dose. Now, if you double that dose, it's going to go into the toilet.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Understanding dosage at that point, that's, I think, the biggest misconception now as people are getting distracted with the different, vape pens and strains. And I go,
Mhm.
when we just understand why it works and what it's doing and the stimulation of that system, we can cut past all of these, talking points that aren't
Right.
helping people. It's more or less confusing.
We do need to clarify also that we're talking about a couple different things here. We're talking
Yes.
about full plant cannabis, and then, or if we're talking about CBD, you don't have the high that you have to worry about, with functioning during the day. So we're covering a couple different things here. Um, so now, how did you get into discovering the way that it works and benefits athletes in specific?
Well, normally what had happened is, we were dealing with disease first, so people were sick. And then some people asked, well, if it's helping with basic inflammation, we started seeing other people as they were recovering, they were able to work out. They would
Mhm.
start going to the gym. Some recreational, what would be considered recreational users, started using it. And, even if you remember pumping iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the
Uh-huh.
70s,
Hmm.
they were using it to recover. It wasn't so much about the high that they were talking about. They was talking about the blood flow because it was helping them recover. And so that's a key thing when people forget about these things. They're looking at the overall, fun of it. But as a recovery agent, we started seeing with individuals, they were able to get in the gym more. They hadn't changed anything else. They didn't change their diet. They were doing all the other same protocols. The only thing new that was introduced was cannabis. And so they started seeing, well, wait a minute, I'm recovering faster. I'm getting a better performance in the gym. And so that was a huge component. And so more and more people started saying, well, wait a minute, I'm not sick. Is this something I should look into? Just from an anti-inflammatory standpoint, I go, it's not going to hurt you. That's
Yeah.
the big thing. And when you start understanding doses and how your body's going to respond to stuff, that helps a lot. And that was the
And,
initial thing that kind of got us into that field.
and when you talk about, do no harm, that's
Yeah.
about the safest, the best do no harm thing there is out there is cannabis. And now, with respect to professional athletes that have to worry about drug testing, like if you remember Nate from the UFC fighter
Hmm.
who was vaping a CBD pen after his fight, and like the world just freaked out. Ah, he's smoking pot. It's like, oh, God help us all. That it's that type of misinformation that really ticks me off in a big
Yeah.
way.
And that's the problem is that culture has to change. When individuals are accepting of the nonsense that's permeated on TV where, someone finds out that they test positive, because we're a right to work state. So even when something becomes legal, doesn't mean you can have it in your system. Well, I
Same in
tell people this,
Colorado.
you don't see the problem with having something that's been proven effective without being toxic. And it's okay for you to test positive with a prescription for oxycodone, which is synthetic heroin. We
Hmm.
have a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And so that's the key thing. This is permeated culture. Do I think there should be a way around it? I go, no, we have to address the fact that that's ridiculous. You're allowing something not because it's right. There's what's morally correct, and then there's what's construed as, man's law. And we're at a point right now where people are saying, well, I don't know. And it's because, well, look at the information. There's a cognitive dissonance that's happening in a person's mind. You're seeing that the FDA keeps on lowering the age of oxycodone. It was 12. I think it's lower now, which is synthetic heroin. That's what it is. I hate to tell you, it's synthetic heroin. And people forget they have such a short attention span. They remember a year ago when they pulled it because there were too many addicts, and they brought it back. Didn't take that long.
Yeah.
So why is that legal? Because someone a doctor wrote a prescription. Well, I always tell people, were they doing the clinicals?
Yeah.
And this is the big, when people have, I hear a lot of different arguments for stuff, and they go, well, there's not enough clinicals on cannabis. And I go, well, I have to remind you of something. Any drug and every drug that was ever pulled had white papers and clinicals on it. It was knowingly toxic, and they put it out there anyway. And it shows you from something as basic as a statin, which has been proven to cause cognitive deficits. They didn't pull it even after proving this. So I go, we have to look at where we're getting our information from, the sources that people have been trusting. They've been being lied to. I mean,
Hmm.
just the basic thing is that look how long it's taken for them to admit, okay, maybe there's a medicinal effect of cannabis. Maybe there's a medicinal effect.
Even though they have studies from the 70s showing that it does,
Correct.
that there is. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. And for example, I know that one of the things, and just because it affects my mother, is Boniva, which was touted and blown, all the advertising and everything with Sally Fields and everything about Boniva, which is for osteoporosis, and ended up making the bones more brittle,
Mhm.
and she's broken her femur twice now. And it's people who are having dental work, their jaw would break when they were trying to take the bones out, take the teeth out and stuff like that. Just terrible things. But then you look at cannabis and the CB2 receptors that are in the bones, and they're doing studies right now with respect to broken bones and the speed of the healing of the bones because of cannabis. And it just like you said, the side effects of these pharmaceuticals are ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it does bother me that the medical industry just poo-poos it. I mean, just absolutely just
Yeah.
shuns it.
And people have to change their perception of stuff rather than saying, well, this is just how it is. Well, if you let it be that way, that's why I was going to stay. When people actually stand up and they actually tell the truth, it's not popular. I get it. The truth is not popular, but it's not what's out there. So when people are being shown things, this is just what's been going on for decades, if not centuries. And that's the problem. It's not going to change unless people start saying, well, wait a minute. Why are we so medicated? Technology's so great and everyone's so sick. That's why when people tell me how advanced we are, I go, really? Then why is everyone so sick?
Yeah.
Everyone's so medicated. They're not getting better. People's lifespans, they can tell me all day longer are lasting longer. And I go, look at the quality of life. They're existing. They're not living. And when you have these things, and again, it does simply become about profit. It's not because it's not effective. If people were to find out that every pharmaceutical that's ever come out is based on a plant, it's man trying to recreate what God put here. So they go, we can't, aspirin's white willow bark. All of these things can be traced back. Marinol is a synthetic version of cannabis. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
They've tried this numerous times to no avail. And the interesting thing is, I always say, rather than getting the clinical on the drug, see if you can ever find the clinical on the plant that the pharma companies studied. Because believe me, we're not that smart. They took the plant, saw the effects, and go, how can we recreate this? And once people see this, they go, wait a minute. You start questioning reality of what's actually going on and what you've been told.
And that's what bugs me, is that people say, well, Marinol didn't work, and so therefore cannabis won't work. It's like, no.
Yeah,
That's
of
not.
course.
Yeah, because it's synthetic, and you need that full spectrum, part of the treatment. It's not just, oh, we'll just take this one little cannabinoid and that's going to cure the world. No, it's the plant and everything that goes with it. So what do you think we have to do to change this mindset?
Well, I was actually recently asked this question in a magazine. What do I think the outlook is for 2017? And I go, I'm hoping people, as they start to see that they've been lied to, start to seek truth and try to find information as best they can. What do I see happening? I see as more states are recreationalizing and legalizing this, it's opening the doors, which is why it's being done in the first place, for big agra and big pharma to get involved, which they've been involved in. This is not something new.
Right.
You have to look ahead. Just because people are getting access to this information now, like, oh, it's medical, you've got to go beyond what they're feeding you. Stop listening to what the news is telling you, because they're 5 steps ahead. For instance, as people are saying, oh, there's a medical effect to cannabis, which they've known, you start to see companies that are getting involved in GMO splicing, controlling the plant. And I always ask someone, if you don't see that happening, go find me organic corn. It's almost impossible to do that at this point because you're splicing genetics, so you have control of the plant. Even worse than that, you have companies, and people can actually look this up. I think it's still on the internet. There's a Portuguese company called Bile. At the beginning of this year, they did a test clinical in the northwest part of France. They created something called Compound 362. This is specifically meant to turn off your endocannabinoid system. So why would you want to turn that system off? So when people tell me, or doctors tell me, what is that system? I always tell people, if your doctor doesn't know what that system is, ask them what they're learning in medical school.
Yeah.
That was shown on record, the endocannabinoid system 35 years ago. It was discovered. So, and this is something that physiologically is tied to all of our cells. There's receptors in the brain and the immune system. It's creating balance and homeostasis in the body. And from that point, people are like, wait a minute, am I not taking anything to stimulate the system? Stuff like echinacea will stimulate your CB2 receptor as well. So you're looking that it's a plant-based, receptor-stimulated system. And so why haven't we been being told about this? And that's why you see benefits of cannabis. I tell you, cannabis isn't magic. I go, it's stimulating your system. And when you stimulate that system, that's why you've seen results with cancer, AIDS, all autoimmune disorders, autism, epilepsy. You can go through the list of stuff. People say, well, cannabis is magic. No, it's activating that system. And when you
Yeah.
activate the system, you have to say, well, wait a minute. Why haven't we been being told about the system if this is creating harmony and balance in the body?
Politics and money. That's why.
So, I mean, I always invite people to try to, go out there, stop, just eating what you're fed, and go look for truth, especially when you find out just one thing. And then cannabis is always a good start because you've been told it does nothing. It's deadly even by its own scheduling by the DEA. It contradicts itself because the way that the class system works is some people don't know when they schedule narcotics. It's based on medicinal usage versus addictive properties. Okay, so what a Schedule 1 narcotic means, it has zero medicinal use and it's highly addictive. So I believe that cannabis is higher than meth on their scale, which makes no sense when you have the government who classifies drugs, who did a study showing it's almost 100% medicinal and showing that with effectively treating cancer. We've seen neurogenesis, we've seen neural pathway development, organ regeneration, cell regeneration, and nerve regeneration. Most of these things have been touted as impossible. And we don't know it's possible, so how can we claim it's impossible? So if someone sees that and they go, well, let's see what else is going on. But yes, it requires someone to care. You have to get out of this apathetic state of, well, I'm being told it, and how is that going to affect my life? It's going to affect your life when you get sick. I don't know if people have noticed now. Cancer is 1 in 2. It's 1 in 2 people are having it at this point. At the rate it's going with abnormal mutations in cells, it would be every one at just the rate that we're going. And other diseases that are happening that are now, people have no idea what they're. You talk to a lot of doctors, they've never seen anything like it. You see an overrunning of sickness, and they're not able to handle this or necessarily even give a diagnosis at some point. So, it is important that people get informed.
It is. It's very important. And the good thing about the rec states and the availability of it, although I'm really hoping that there are a lot of seed saver people out there to keep the good seeds going, but it will increase the awareness of the anecdotal results. And so when you know someone specifically who has benefited from it and you see it with your own eyes, it just makes it more real to you. And so as more and more of that happens, I'm hoping that it will become more mainstreamed so that people can accept it more, and then maybe do a little bit of research. So that, you talked about that. It's hard to do research, on the internet.
A lot of misinformation.
It's a lot of misinformation.
It's interesting. I ask, and I pose this question to everyone. I go, how many studies do you need? You need one. You. If you or a family member gets better, 50,000 doctors could tell you it doesn't work, but you're not going to be shaken because you've seen it. And that's what people have to understand. They have to stop listening to people's opinions and not forget what they see with their own eyes. People can be very easily dissuaded from something like that that's not real. I knew when it helped my wife what it was doing, but I also knew that the majority of people would say it's a fluke. And so at that point, I started tracking other people that we were working with. And so it was impossible for them to deny it. They could believe whatever they want, because what most people don't understand is it's an opinion. Most of the stuff that we've been able to show, molecular biologists can't explain. They still can't explain it because it's showing you there is faith involved in this. People that get the best results with cannabis, whether it's something just like as simple as inflammation or treating a disease, it's their faith. That's what's helping with it. And people are starting to understand. One of the reasons I think that it's been classified like it has for so long is not just the medicinal effects, but the spiritual implications. More importantly, the decalcification of your pineal. And when people don't understand what the pineal is, it has a much bigger role than most people understand. But just the simple connection to melatonin, serotonin, and dopamine. And I tell people, I go, I guess it's just a coincidence. Those are the 3 main drugs that pharma pushes: sleep aids, antidepressants, and painkillers. And so you can start to see a bigger thing that's forming. I didn't say it was not going to be painful to learn the truth, but it's still the truth. Yeah. That's what I think people want at this point. And it changes their perspective when they themselves or someone they know gets sick. Yeah. And then you're a lot more open to what's out there. And truth, that's when you want it. That's when you want it.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing is, when you talk about dosing, there are a lot of products out there that are just casual products. They just don't have the concentration of the cannabinoids to really make a difference. And so people buy this because it's inexpensive or whatever, and oh, it didn't help me. Basically, and truthfully, a lot of it is snake oil.
Yeah.
So, how do you work with people who have tried it and it just, like they tried it once?
And this is the thing, is
Because
that
if you take a Vicodin, you feel it.
you feel it. And here's the thing that I have with this industry as well, that they're propagating the same problem because they're not defining what they're stating. So someone will say, oh, I just need CBD. I go, no, because you'll end up purchasing hemp oil online. And there's a reason you can get that anywhere, and most of it's full of preservatives and garbage. And most of the hemp comes from China. Most people don't know that. But
Yeah,
so
you got to be careful.
people they're not educated enough on what's working. They're like, well, do I need this or that? I go, the plant is cannabis. It supplies a wide range of CBA, CBN, and that's where the strain difference would come in, is what holds more different terpenes. I go, that's the important role. Dosing, subtle stimulation of the system over time will produce cumulative results. So it's not something where you do it once and you're cured. By doing low doses, you can avoid psychoactive effects while still stimulating that system and not worrying about, well, am I going to build up a tolerance to it? Because again, you're still metabolizing it. I find that in concentrates, that's where you have better absorption. What does that mean? Some people prefer vaping and smoking. That's fine. It gets in your system fast. The absorption is not there. Your absorption is very low. Let's just say 5-10%. When you're talking about something, let's say like an edible or an oil, it's higher. Even with the breakdown of your hepatic enzyme, it's a higher, and that's why dosage becomes important, because if someone has a brownie, they go, I can't eat it. I go, you didn't know how much was in brownie 1 versus brownie 12. So as a patient, someone needs to know a controlled dose. And this is like you're taking anything else each day. Well, I take this vitamin every day. How much do you take? You know that. So if you know you're taking a half a grain of rice, you know the serving you're taking each day. And the less times you have to take it, the better. There's people out there that, again, recommend high doses of, let's say, oil. Concentrates what we kind of specialize in. But then it goes out the window, because I go, you're only absorbing so much. So what are you doing with the rest of it? It's going to the toilet, like supplements.
Yeah.
If you're getting all your protein at one time, you're not absorbing 100 grams of protein in breakfast. So, right, you're getting it throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different with this. So if you're doing low doses because it's fat soluble, that's the better thing. And I understand people that are in pain, but again, it's helping over time. People are used to a quick fix. That's the problem. And that's
true. And if it helps them to get to that point, take the oil or take the edibles, but take the vape to get rid of the immediate pain. I mean, like for me,
I mean, that I understand. You can
with a migraine, no, I want it to work now.
Of course.
Because otherwise I'll be puking.
So. And see, that's the difference. When you can understand based on what someone's treating you, if you have initial pain right now, you have a migraine, vaping would be the best bet, because it's initial in the system, 5 minutes, and you're getting initial relief. For long-term relief to also help prevent migraines, and you can use another thing and then just time it based during the day. It doesn't all have to be done at once. But then people are starting to see options, because now they're just hearing it works. Well, what form should I take it in? And see, there's so much information out there that people go, I'm just trying to figure out what am I supposed to use. And then
we're programmed to have a doctor tell us to take this pill however many times a day for however long, sometimes for the rest of your life. We're programmed for people to tell us what to do. We're not programmed to feel our own bodies and to adjust things based on the effects that we're getting.
Yeah. We become very detached from ourselves, and that's the problem, is that, God gave us a brain to critically think, not just to take stuff and say, well, I don't have to worry about this because they're an expert. An expert in what? I go, what makes someone an expert? We're an expert in
tests.
Yeah. I go,
they passed a lot of tests. They're good.
And who designed the curriculum? I always ask people, I go, you look back to the source. When you look at something, they're an expert. Why? They went to school. Who designed the curriculum? Come to the turn of the century, 20th century, in the early 1900s, there was 3 main schools of thought. It wasn't just MDs, homeopathy, chiropractic. These were on equal footing. And then someone threw a lot of money into the pharmaceutical industry and that somehow trumped it. Now the other 2 things are looked at as snake oil, which is ridiculous, because you'll see that there's great benefits to correct chiropractic work and good herbalists that know this stuff. I always ask people, how do people live before doctors? These are just
I know my grandmother lived till almost 99. My great grandmother 95. Her mother 95, and her mother before that 93. And there was no pharmaceutical industry out there,
was.
in the 1700s.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that we've been convinced that we need this to live. And that's the problem. I hear it. I see how patients are scared. And they're like, if I don't do this, I'm going to die.
Exactly.
No one knows when you're going to die. Jesus does. We do not. So when even people say, I can extend your life, no, you can't, because you don't know your expiration date.
Exactly.
So start looking at the terminology that's being used and start to change that. We can kind of cut past, which is just, it's marketing. I hate to tell people this. And,
Yeah.
I'm not saying all doctors are condoning this. Some are just ignorant. If you don't know, and I've had doctors that approach me and they go, even the AMA doesn't provide them good education. What they'll do is they'll be told, oh, come learn about cannabis. It'll be a propaganda piece where it's just simply they're going to this thing, the person knows absolutely nothing about it. And they're taking that stuff as, well, this person told me, so I'm going to go now and tell my patients this. And see, that's the problem. That lie keeps on getting passed along. So
I have to tell you that cannabis clinicians have some really good trainings. They have, and I've seen their their seminars, where people from all over the country come in. They got, Meshulam from Israel talking, and on Skype and answering questions. It's getting there, but still, the majority of the people that are attending these conferences are not MDs.
yeah, I know. And they're being, like I said, there's a huge conflict of interest in certain degrees of medicine. There's no way an oncologist can tell you it's not a conflict of interest when they're getting kickbacks for chemo.
Mm-hmm.
How is it not? They're not going to be able to buy a boat if they're being honest. But that's when a person as an individual has to look at themselves and say, look, you will be accountable for your actions and what you're doing. And if you realize that you're pushing mustard gas, which is what chemotherapy is,
Yeah.
and you're knowingly doing it, you can no longer claim ignorance. And especially, when you ask people why they get into medicine, it should be to help people. But where did that go wrong? Where did that stop when it's like now it's about buying houses? And, you can stop doing things. People have to stop thinking this is the way things are, so I have to go along with it. If someone comes up and just go shoot that person in the head, you're going to do it because someone told you to do it, or you're going to, your conscience has to come out and say, this is wrong. We have to make a change. We have to be a change.
Yeah.
I don't look on a global scale of, a person has to go out there and do stuff. You can do stuff in your communities and start changing the ways that people see things. That's what it is. People think the problem's too massive. It only appears that way. But if individuals start educating and helping others when they need help, that's what's going to make a change.
Yes. And that is what I hope will be happening with these new rec states and these new medical marijuana states is since we don't have the the medical leaders with education on it, we have to rely on each other. We have to find places where we can get good information. The meetup groups, the Facebook groups, there's several social networks now that are cannabis related. There's places like your place, CAP, where people can contact you and say, I need help. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just so very grateful that there are people stepping up to fill this ridiculously massive void.
Yeah.
So how about you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. The Compassion Awareness Project is a project that I started obviously because when my wife got sick and I started seeing the flaws, many of them, in the medical system. And then as I got more into cannabis research, I started seeing there was no information out there. So, it's almost like filling a gap of where's this nexus of information coming from? There's a lot of misinformation. So what this project does, and we are a 501c3, it falls under the Cultural Arts Training Foundation, so people can look that up. We help do medical consulting. So we give people their options. We kind of cut through a lot of the myths. We've helped people for free get their medical marijuana cards. These are simple things that people can do where you watch how the state shows it. They're like, oh, you got to pay $500. And I go, it's a piece of paper. These are easy things to make. And so when people start hearing it, they go, oh, that's all that it took. That's all that it took. So to make someone's life easier and give them hope, that's the purpose of the project, is to renew people's hope in what's becoming a hopeless world. But telling them it's going to be all right. I've had a lot of people that we've consulted for come into the office, and the first thing you do is like, the doctor gave me this long to live. I hear it all, and I go, in what way is that going to help you?
Do you have a tattoo somewhere that says expiration day?
Yeah. So when people see that there's hope, they leave and they feel relieved, and just that alone is enough to kind of, and it's not fake hope. You're giving people truth, and that's what they want to
Mhm.
see. And just my thing is this: is that if someone knows their options, they can make an educated choice. I'm not just saying you have to use cannabis. You can use this, or this. And if you know the things that you have, you now can become an educated consumer. If you're told this is the only way you can do stuff, you're not making an educated decision. It's making a forced decision. So
And you've got
that
no
would,
control.
what's that?
Your control is taken away from you then.
Correct. So just to help people put them back, and I think they forget that doctors don't pay them. You pay the doctors. They work for you. And somehow it's been reversed to where, people say, well, if I ask a question, I get yelled at, right? So I always invite people, ask questions. You should ask questions. You should question this stuff. That's the purpose of learning. So that was the main reason that we founded this, was to just teach, to give people the information that they needed, not to sit there and gouge. That's a pharmaceutical company's job. To help is to help give back, to show people that there is hope.
One of the things that really bothers me is that, and time again I hear this, is that when they let their doctor know that they are taking cannabis for cancer, for whatever, MS, epilepsy, whatever, time and time again, there are doctors who will fire
Mhm.
the patient.
Yeah, firing patients. I mean, and this is this is another misconception when I've heard doctors say, well, I can't sign off, and we're talking about a medical state, I can't sign off on your card. I don't know where it says that they're approving cannabis. They're not. What they're simply stating is the patient has a condition, they can benefit from cannabis. They're not writing a prescription for cannabis.
Mhm.
I'm always amazed when I talk to doctors. I'm like, do you realize you're not backing cannabis? You're simply stating your patient does have cancer. You're verifying they have a disease. That's
Yeah,
all why they're coming to see you. And so this has been even more confusing because people are afraid to now share what they're doing with their doctors. They feel like they're going to be fired, which is the
exactly.
ridiculous thing I've ever heard, that a
It
doctor
is,
can fire a patient.
but it
Um,
happens.
I know I see it a lot. When really the patient should be firing their doctors. And that's the key thing. And there's really a very limited amount of accountability with prescription filling, because a doctor gives you whatever. And why aren't they ever telling you how to wean off of it? I always ask, well, because they're not expecting you to be their problem when that happens. That's the key thing. You ask a person from now versus 5 years ago, are you feeling better? And are you on more or less meds? And the answer is always the same. I feel worse and I'm on
More.
exponentially more medicine.
Hmm.
So something has to change with that. You have to question that you're not going in the direction you thought you were. It's a Band-Aid on a bullet hole and it's getting worse. That's the problem.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So when it comes to specifically workout regimens,
Mm-hmm.
going back to the athletes, um, there are so many different ways, like you talked about, the oils, the vapes, the edibles, the salves, the patches, on and on and on and on. What do you find works best for an athlete? Like, let's just say it's somebody who likes to work out hard, 5 days a week, really takes care of their body. They're not a professional, but they're trying to take care of themselves, to stay healthy.
I think it would be a combination. I think topicals are very good for on-spot muscle issues, and people don't have to worry about necessarily testing with stuff because that can be applied topically. Um, Oils, I tend to think concentrates are the best, not in a vape pen. I mean, like Simpson oil in low doses, just because of the absorption. That would be one of the best things. Not saying that the other things don't work. My problem with edibles, especially if you're health conscious, you have to watch sugar and you've got to watch dosing. So that's the only problem with that, but they're still effective. So in any form someone's going to be using it, it's going to be effective. It's just really the level of effectiveness.
Right.
So people can kind of, not that you want to kind of, let me try this and this, but and most health conscious people don't want to smoke. So the smoking side kind of goes away. So I would say more or less topicals,
Hmm.
sublingual absorption, and internal absorption are some of the best methods. Especially if you know the source of what you're getting, know the quality of the products that you're using. That's the most important thing, because you could be going to something and it's laced with pesticide. So,
Exactly.
again, you have to know the source. It's like a person will put more emphasis on their supplements. Well, they're looking at that stuff. So again, if you're looking at the supplements, this is just considered another supplement for the body to stimulate that system. But from our research and what we've seen, because it's higher absorption, I would say oil,
Yeah.
specifically cannabis oil. But again, that doesn't mean that's the only thing that works. I think
Right.
a combination of that and topicals are helpful because some people are like, well, I don't want to take anything, but even having something as a muscle, relaxant, soreness, which is common, and also the ways that people work out, that's a whole other show. But they've got to change that. People, they'll go to the gym, they'll do an arm day, and I go, you just get up in the morning and say, I'm going to use my legs. Similar things, you're made to move. So if you train everything, and everyone trains different, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the gym. It means activity. So it's activity that you like will keep you moving. But that's one of the things that's changing is people are becoming less active.
Yeah.
They're becoming less active. So it's not a miracle to where you can just use cannabis and you get in shape. You have to do these things, rest, supplementation, food, and your workout. They all have to complement each other in a way.
Yeah, and we're kind of training our kids not to be active in a way when you talk about schools taking recess out and PE out and things like that.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. These are things where I think people have to stop letting electronics raise their kids. You weren't raised on electronics. I mean, that's the key thing that this is why you see it's not just food. Food's one thing, but again, aside from the other things that are having a negative influence on your children, you are the influence. You can be there and saying, let's do this together. And so you can kind of start that activity in your household. You can also do it in your community. You can start, walking groups and stuff like this to get people involved.
You can also let your school district know that, no, I believe the kids do need physical education every day because that is education.
Right. Where are you starting your education at there? So whatever you're learning there, you take with you like everything else. So if you're learning falsehoods there, you're going to grow with those falsehoods and believe, well, I can eat pizza every day because it's fun.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. It does become where people have become very removed. And they have to, all of this stuff, then you have to now come back and kind of take control and say, wait a minute, this is our lives. We have to kind of, be involved.
Now, what about when you're talking about the dosing, you talk about the biphasic properties of cannabis. And we haven't really talked a lot about that before. I think we've only talked about like maybe 2 or 3 times out of 30 episodes. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. With dosing that I've seen is normally I'd recommend 1 of 2 doses. And I'm talking about specifically concentrates because people will learn their reaction. Everyone's different in regards to how they're going to react. We're mainly speaking of an indica base. So if someone's using like an oil, we'll say that the normal train of thought, which was by Rick Simpson, who kind of made that prevalent. That's who got it out in the community. There's an exponential increase, which doesn't make sense if someone thinks about, well, it's fat soluble. Again, if it's fat soluble, you're going to get a buildup and you're going to overstimulate the system. So yes, the system can be overstimulated. What does that mean? It's an uncomfortable high. That's what that means. That's an overstimulation of your endocannabinoid system. So very low dosing, let's say half a grain of rice, for instance, over time, when the system's normally stimulated based on someone's metabolism, let's say a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, from that point, because it's fat soluble, it doesn't need to be every day. So this is now something that can be used every other day, and you can start to change it. On average, what we've seen is after a 4-day time off is when it starts to leak out of the system medically. I'm not saying you're not going to test for it. I'm saying you're not seeing the results that you were. So if you find out you have 4 days of being off something before you start feeling the effects of it, now you're given a better scale of what's going on. So for basic athletes that are allowed to use it based on the rules of what they're doing, or just people that want to go work out, less is more in all of these things. And I have to always tell people that high, the psychoactive effect, is not the medicinal effect. The medicinal effect is actually the next day. It's as people start to go on, they go, I feel better. They wake up, they feel rested. It's not when they're high counting sheep. It's the other part of it. So we have to separate that thing where people are saying the psychoactive effect is the medicating effect.
Right.
No, the psychoactive effect is the stimulation of your CB1 receptor. Although that's good if you could avoid the high completely and get the benefits of both. That's what we want. And that's why we normally talk about lower dosing over time rather than, you didn't get sick overnight. So if you're trying to get better overnight, you're going to have that same problem. These are cumulative buildups in the system. I think most doctors and scientists that have studied this would also agree that the low dosing, and I'm just talking about with oil, but even with plant matter, people are in a way chasing that dragon of I have to keep on getting this high, and that's the problem.
Because that's how the opiates work.
Correct.
And that's what we're used to.
Yeah.
So
when you question that, you say it's no longer about that, but it's stimulating the system, and I feel good and I can stop. that's the mindset has to change. And so that's the key thing by changing the mind. That's education. By
Yeah.
understanding that, where people are used to a quick fix, where they're given a painkiller, it's like, oh, I feel good. You're not going to feel good in a few hours.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. We were looking at long-term recovery, not a short-term fix. And it's not
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah. We always come back to education and misinformation.
Always.
Always, always, always. It gets tiring, but
No, I hear you.
yeah. So, with respect to, like we spoke about a little bit earlier when it came to scheduling and stuff, um, I don't think that I know that there are some people who don't quite understand. They know, okay, Schedule 1, blah blah blah. I've heard all about Schedule 1. They think it's such a great thing that it could go to Schedule 2. How would you explain that to people? What
Scheduling,
exactly is Schedule 2?
scheduling to me is just, it has people looking in the wrong direction. Like when they were talking about descheduling that, people chased after this for a year and they didn't reschedule it. Scheduling does not take away jail time. It just minimizes the sentence that you're going to get, but in no way does it make it acceptable or legal. And this is the key thing. Why do I think they classified it so high for so long? To limit research. Because if you're going to get a life sentence on something, who's going to use it? Who's going to research it? So why is that? So you start asking yourself, why was that so severe, that specific drug? Declassification of it means nothing. It's still going to sit higher than a steroid, the anabolics. So it's legalizing it. We're being told that something that's medical, well, they're telling us when we can use it. So these are the things that people have to kind of look at. It's like, well, wait a minute, what are we being told here? So it's kind of like that carrot in front of the rabbit where you keep on like pulling it, but in no way is it giving the people what they need to know. It's releasing information as they want it released, not the way that it should be told to people. Like, this is a plant, you can grow it in your backyard, it's medicinal. People knew this, then they have an option. You have the ability to use this or not use it. But to say, well, now we're recognizing that it's medicinal, but we have to control it, I find that odd. So when people jump up and down, the states are now getting medical and some recreational, I go, they still want to control it. They're not vanquishing control. I know out here, they've limited it since we're becoming recreational with people being able to grow. I go, wait a minute, how is it recreational when a patient can't grow?
So they can't grow at all in Nevada?
There's certain stipulations where you can, but there's stipulation. Well, how is there a stipulation? If it's legal, what do you mean there's a stipulation? I can't grow my own plant. Say it's legal as long as it's done by their methods, not by your method. And see, that's the key thing. People have to see the difference. It's not the same thing, because if you control the source, you have to get it from us. And again, look how well that's worked out with water and food. So people have to look at these things. That's why I tell people, I go, as you're learning and something's released and the information comes out, keep looking at other things. Turn off all the garbage that you're being told, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. As you find stuff and you talk to people, you got to talk to people. It's word of mouth. Going on the internet is awful at this point, because you're getting both. You're getting and you can't differentiate.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have doctors that have misinformation. They come in, they're like, what? They were told the same thing. So, that's the hard thing, is people say, well, I wish there was a source. Well, believe me, if there was one source, it would quickly be shut down.
Yes, by the FDA immediately.
Yeah, so that's the key thing. It's knowing locally.
Do you think that like finding good like online groups?
Yes, I think that's it. I think support groups, other patients that maybe, like I said, are suffering with the same disease, because it's relatable. There's nothing worse than talking to someone and you think they're being condescending or they're not understanding what you're talking about. When you talk to people that are in the same boat, you can relate, and that becomes that kind of link up. So support groups, I think, are very good for this, because you have a like mindset. You're on the same page of like, I have this, you have this. What are you doing? And that's how you trade ideas. But see, that's the thing. We're no longer going to each other. We're going online. And this is, people are worshiping this thing. And I go, but how do you know the information you're getting is truth?
Exactly.
And that's the problem. So again, we have to kind of unplug from a lot of this stuff and kind of get back into more grassroots and an organic approach to working with each other,
There's nothing scarier to a big agency than grassroots.
Oh, yeah.
Scares the crap out of them.
That and truth. I don't like either of those things.
Yeah, no, they don't want to deal with that. No. So, if there are people out there, and I know there are people out there who need guidance, how do they get in touch with you?
You can find us on Facebook. It's Compassion Awareness Project. If you want to come to our site, and again, we consult. We're not doctors because I don't practice. CompassionAwarenessProject.org. You can go on there. You can always email us. You can call us. We'll be happy to answer questions. Probably online is the easiest way to get a hold of us. We'll call you back. It's not going to be this chit-chatting through texting. It's going to be a conversation. If you're in town, we'll do face-to-face.
Really? A phone call?
Yeah, imagine that. Actually talk on the phone, because we're not going to communicate this in the text. But that's how people can initially, and a lot of times it's just answering very basic questions. And then that's what people need. They just want that source where it's like, well, thank you. I had no idea.
Exactly.
This was an option.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what have you got coming up, for plans for your organization and for you personally?
I'm just out there. I'm just a messenger, just spreading the word and trying to help people. That's the key thing. I don't plan on setting up things all over the place. More or less, it's trying to educate people in different parts of the world so that they can go and be that, part. It's not a matter of someone can fill your space. We're all different. But if people can be informed and then take that, we all have little qualities that we can benefit from. So by helping different people and then connecting with like-minded individuals in your community, whether it's bakers and starting a healthy movement in a way, and an informed movement. So where we're kind of not relying on misinformation, we're relying on each other, and that it's through things that we've gone through. That's what it becomes about. Like I said, if someone has a situation they've gone through, you could read 1,000 studies. It's not going to shake them. It's not going to shake it. So when you talk to other people, that's kind of helping, reinforce what we're doing.
Yeah, I am in a couple of groups. I'm in with Facebook, the Canna Moms and the American Medical Refugees, and you'll be, I'm sure, getting an American Medical Refugee branch or group in Nevada soon, since you're going to be rec. And it's so wonderful to see people supporting each other. And like just the other day, one of the moms was saying, I'm doing a puree for a feeding tube. What are you guys using? And so they're using each other as resources to try to figure out. Yeah. And everyone's quick to say, well, this is what worked for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Correct.
But at least it's a place to start.
Of course. Yeah. That's the key thing. If you have options, you're saying, well, this is what this person used, this is what this person used. You have options. But to not have any options, to not know step one, that's the hardest thing, because you just, your back's against the wall and you don't know which way to go.
It's scary. And especially when you're so vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
So, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we will reconnect again in the future as things progress and new things come out, and everybody check out Lance's page. He's got a wonderful project there. If you can support him, do what you can, because just getting the word out, education, and trying to reduce the stigma around it, which is absurd, and make it as mainstream as possible. That's what we're going to have to do, and we need to rely on each other. So, and they may call it anecdotal, but if it works, it works.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week, and until then, stay happy and stay healthy.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thanks again for listening, and be sure to tune in again next Wednesday at cbdtalkpodcast.com. Until then, stay happy and stay healthy.